Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So people are panicking. um, it's surprising to me that people are so worried because we're a few days after the visa bulletin, and there have been no 2NLs, right? Um, I I'm confused by the comments I see. I see people who are saying, "Oh well, it's cancelled." Um, there are no more interviews going to be set for September. One guy this morning says, "You will see, there will be no more for Africa because Africa says the word current." Um, After all this time, people still don't understand the very basics of this process. So they have no idea what the word current means, and they assume that means that there are no more interviews. Or, a week after the visa bulletin is published, even though we always get 2NLs later in the month, some people believe that means that the process is over and that there are going to be no interviews for September. It's incredibly stupid. There's no other way of putting it. There is absolutely no reason to think that there are not going to be interviews arranged for September. There's absolutely no logical reason to think that. So, people have just got to keep calm and wait for KCC to do their work. Now, why is it that KCC are late in sending out 2NLs? Right. Let's talk about that. Let's just try and consider what might be different this month than in any other month. Right. In any other month, um, the visa bulletin wasn't a huge, ridiculous mess. Right. That's a factor that's different this month. I'm sure the staff at KCC, the staff at KCC don't set the number. They receive the number from the visa office, right? They see the number actually a little bit before we do. And that's why they are able sometimes in some months, they're able to send out 2NLs right up to the visa bulletin numbers within a day or two after the visa bulletin is processed. In some months, they're able to do that. In this month, they received a big shock, like we all did, right? If they do know what's going on, KCC staff don't really do the calculations. They don't really understand the import of the numbers, I don't think. But some of them will probably be aware. Maybe they even watch my videos. And so some of them will have realized that the visa bulletin was kind of stupid. It would have presented a problem. So firstly, first factor is they got a visa bulletin that is unlike any other that we've seen this year, right? Because it's nuts. Second factor is it's the last visa bulletin of the year. There's not going to be any more visa bulletins for DV 2024. So unlike any other month in the year, if they missed scheduling someone in this final month of scheduling, then there is no more chance for that person. They can't say, "Oh, well, don't worry, we'll catch up with that group of people next month," right? So common sense, frankly, would tell you that they're going to be a little bit more cautious in how they schedule the interviews, because they know that this is the last opportunity to schedule interviews for people, right? So that's factor number two, being cautious because it's the last month of scheduling at all, right? The other thing that they will be, I think, wrestling with is going back to there's a couple of ways they could play the visa bulletin numbers that they were given. They could say, okay, we're going to schedule as many cases as we can possibly schedule. That means going back to every embassy that has told us, hey, you've given us a capacity of 20 cases or 50 cases for the month of September, but in order to reach the current number, we have to go to 150 cases. Can you take a bit more than normal? So that negotiation may be happening this month that isn't normally happening, right? And so that's probably going to take extra time. That's factor number three. Factor number four is the fact that if they do too much of that, if they push too many interviews out there, then they are going to recreate the situation that we had in DV 2023, where interviews were actually cancelled on from September 6th onwards, right? So people turning up for interview on September 7th for scheduled interviews were told, no, sorry, all the visas are gone, right? So if they schedule too many interviews for September, that will happen again. Now, I don't know whether they are in control of the numbers enough to know whether that's going to happen again or not, and are trying to take some precautions to avoid that happening by distributing the visas or the 2NLs in some sort of way to make it not go over about 4,000 2NLs for the month. Or are they trying to schedule so many 2NLs to try and reach the visa bulletin numbers that they've lost numerical control, and they will reintroduce the specter of cancelled interviews? But either way, whether they do it one way or whether they do it the other way, that's a fifth factor, or another factor. I think I've lost count, but it's another factor that means that this September 2NL setup is more complicated than usual. They've either got a lot more work to do, or because they're going to schedule loads of cases, or they're trying to control the number of cases that they schedule to not lose numeric control, one way or the other. But either way, that's more work for them to do, right? And so it's not at all surprising to me, that we haven't had 2NLs yet. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if they started today or tomorrow or in a week's time. It doesn't matter a damn. So those of you that have got your knickers in a twist because they haven't sent out 2NLs so far, you need to calm down. You need to chill the heck out, because they're going to send 2NLs for every region. Okay, they are going to do that. How many it will be, I don't know. Will they create chaos in the final month? I don't know. But will they send out 2NLs? Of course they bloody well will. Yes, they will. So please, all those negative ninnies, the stupid people who are going on various forums and asking about, or saying, rather, they're not asking, they're stating, oh, it's over, because they haven't sent them by the 15th. Honestly, I'm staggered. People just make shit up. They haven't sent them by the 15th. That's never happened before. And so, so that means it's over. Well, firstly, yeah, we have had months where they haven't sent them before the 15th and they have sent them later. So your point is stupid. And, the fact that they cannot possibly hit the numbers, if they just stopped on what they've scheduled for August, they cannot possibly hit the numbers. It's not like we've run out of visas. We cannot possibly have run out of visas. There aren't enough people scheduled. There's only about 62,000 people scheduled. 61,119 people scheduled. They can't possibly have scheduled enough people to hit the 55K limit. So it's not like visas are maxed out, right? It just isn't, right? So all of you stupid people that think that it's over, honestly, you need to go back to Dunning-Kruger University and figure out where your life went wrong. For those of you that are worried and you're just concerned, yeah, I understand why you're worried and you're concerned, but just be patient, okay? There is more for them to do this month than in a normal month, and so they're taking a little bit more time about it. It's perfectly fine. There's no rule that says they have to send out the interviews before the 15th of the month or the 16th of the month or anything else like that. There's no rule at all like that. Okay. All right. So that being said, let's look at the other side of the fence. Embassy capacity is the other thing that we need to think about. There are plenty of embassies that, unless they heroically increase their capacity, they can't possibly get to the current numbers. The Africa 122,000 or whatever it is, Europe 50,000. They can't get to those numbers, right? If they have normal capacity, or the capacity that they've shown this year that is available. Now, if I answered someone this morning, and this person was asking about Frankfurt embassy, and the person had correctly calculated that they needed to, in order to get to their number, which was, I think, EU 43,000 or 42,000 or something. In order to get to that number in Frankfurt, at the number of visas, number of cases per thousand that Frankfurt had, there needed to be something like 150 interviews arranged in this final month. That is significantly more than Frankfurt have taken so far this year, but it is less than the maximum number we've seen in previous recent years, DV22 and 23. So is there capacity at the embassy to do hundreds of interviews? Yeah, there is that capacity. But what I said to this person thinking about Frankfurt was that if every embassy went and did that, heroically went to the maximum case numbers, let's say, went crazy and said, yeah, we'll take lots of interviews, then that would create the situation where we've got too many interviews arranged for the month of September, and there would be cancellations in September at some point. I don't know whether it would be September 6th, September 10th, September 19th. I'm not saying what date it would be, but there would be a scenario where they could max out and use up all of the available visas, right? And they will stop the process. We saw them last year; they stopped the process. So my explanation to this person that asked me the question was, hey, yeah, in Frankfurt, if they decide to take that number of cases in that month, then maybe you could get current. But you also, as well as your embassy behaving heroically just for you and for other people at that embassy, you need other embassies to not behave heroically, to not schedule to their maximum. Because if every embassy schedules to their theoretical maximum number of 2NLs, of interviews, then we will surely max out and exceed the available visas, and visa interviews will have to be cancelled, right? So there's no doubt about it. The visa bulletin was just wrong. I mean, that's about to become very, very obvious to people. It will probably, to some people, it will only be obvious towards the end of September when they see issuances happening and they see scheduling, etc. And you'll see on Zarthisius's page, you'll see a bit of a bizarre thing where up to a certain case number in each region, there's pretty good capacity being used, but then it becomes much less, there'll be much less interviews scheduled for later numbers. And it will depend on each embassy, but we'll have to wait and see how that behaves. I've answered several questions this morning on specific embassies, but the process is the same for checking each embassy to see whether you think they're going to get to your number or not. And the process is this: you work out how many cases that embassy has taken, typically within a region, but how many cases has that embassy taken so far this year, right? And you'll come up with a number of cases per thousand. And it works better if it's within one region. So if it's, let's say, an EU embassy, you can get a number of cases per thousand, and you therefore can say, okay, if that embassy has, for example, 30 cases per thousand, and I need them to move 10,000 numbers to get to my number, then I need them to do 10 times 30, that's 300 interviews. That embassy has only done up to 100 interviews so far this year. It doesn't seem likely that they'll get to my number, right? Or they've interviewed 400 people, 400 cases in a single month this year. Oh, okay, I think I've got a chance then, right? That's the sort of calculation. You need to know how many thousands, how many interviews there are per thousand in your region for that embassy, right? And it's a bit more complicated at some of these embassies that have multiple regions within them. that makes it a little bit more complicated because you actually can't be sure whether they're going to go to, let's say, the Asia region or the Africa region or the EU region to use those numbers, because it depends on how the AVQ is being used, how it looked prior to this month. But you can get a pretty good idea. So let me do one actually. Let me do an assessment for you of one embassy. Let's see. So we come to Zarthis' brilliant page, right? And we're going to pick. Who should we pick? Let's pick Nairobi, right? And always pick on Nairobi because I'll do a couple probably, but it's a fairly good embassy. It's been behaving well, and most of its activity is in one region, right? So here's what it looks like. Here's their sort of their chart, right? Now, firstly, down here we can see how many interviews they've taken per month for each month, and here we can look at the chart and we can say, okay, between 1 and 2,000, there were about 70 cases. And if we take an average per 1,000, since this is in 2,000 chunks, we roughly half these numbers. So I'm going to say that the average is about, let's say, 32. So let's say there's 32, maybe 33 or something, maybe even 35, right? No, 35 is too much. Right, 32. We're going to say 32 cases per 1,000 is going to be the demand on Nairobi, right? So they're currently at, they reached very close to the highest cutoff, and they're about 72, 73, just over 72,000. So what would they need to do in order to get to case number 85,000, for example, right? How many interviews would they need? Well, they'd have to get from, let's say, call it 73,000 to 85,000. So let's say that's 12,000 numbers. So 12,000 times 32 would give us, what, 380 interviews. That's how many interviews they would need to schedule to get to case number 85,000 in the visa bulletin, right? Okay, what have they done recently? Well, in May, they took 373 cases. In April, they took 339 plus this one, 340 cases. In March, they took 166. And most recently in June, they took 346. So could they get to 380 interviews? Yeah, they could. It's possible. They might get to 85,000, in other words, right? Now, if your case is 100,000 and they're currently at 23, then you need another 15,000 cases on top of that, which is another 450 cases. So you would need to see more than that, actually. It's a bit more, 480 cases. So you would need to see that embassy accepting 900 cases. Now, has that ever happened? Well, it's never happened in this year. That 892 is the total for 3 months. If we go back and we have a look at, have they ever taken that, right? We can say, okay, we can look at DV23 and see what they took. No, they, hang on, let's just go and have a look at Nairobi. NLB. Right, so that's Nairobi. Did they ever take anything like that? No, they didn't take anything like that. Then DV22 was where the true capacity was shown for a lot of these embassies, but I don't think Nairobi did very much in 22. Let's have a look. So it may not be very telling in DV22. No, they did 340. 199, and actually this is pretty good, actually. So on August the 2nd and August the 3rd and August the 8th and August the 11th, they took cases, right? So if you add up all of these numbers, 300, 640 plus that 700, so in that all of those interviews were being arranged for September of 22. And they took, what's that, 750 cases. So that's what I would call their heroic performance in terms of scheduling. So it's possible, sort of. Is it likely? Not very likely that they would take 700 or 800. We just don't know. And bear in mind, if one embassy such as Nairobi was to take 700 or 800 interviews, that would be about 1,500 people, right? And they've already scheduled 28,000 people so far. So, if every embassy behaves like that heroically, then we are definitely going to max out and have an early cutoff, because the visas will be exhausted in September. So, be careful what you wish for. In other words, they just shouldn't have created the visa bulletin. The visa bulletin going current is just nuts. The only people it will help is people on adjustment of status in America, or people at pretty small embassies that have some capacity, but not very much activity normally. So, there'll be a few cases, but for the majority of big embassies, it's not going to be like that. Let's do another one. Let's do Yaoundé, right? We're back on 24, yeah. So let's do Cameroon. Okay, so Cameroon have taken in, let's say, 612 and 625, they've taken about 320. That was their best performance of the year, right? Their average number of cases per 1,000, they go up to about 72,000 also, a little bit under that. Average cases per 1,000, it looks like it's less than 25, roughly, maybe 22. Same sort of calculation. They could if they took 320 cases, that would be around about 15,000. They'd get from 72,000 to 87,000. That's roughly where they could get to if they take about 320 odd cases, roughly. That's how you work it out, right? Let's look at a sort of a much smaller. Let's see, Moldova, Chisinau, Moldova. Right, Chisinau, mainly EU, right? What else they got? They got any AF? No. Any OC? No, nothing else. Okay, so it's all EU. And the cases per 1,000 are very low, right? So I wanted to show you an example of a smaller embassy. The average number of cases there is probably something like 2 cases per 1,000. This is now in 1,000 chunks, so it's around about 2, right? And they've got to almost 30,000, the previously current number. So they've kept up with performance fairly well. But they only schedule a small number of cases. They only scheduled last month. They probably only scheduled 7 cases last month because that's all that they needed to schedule to get to the highest case number that was current, right? So that's not an indication last month of their capacity. Their capacity is probably more clearly demonstrated by the previous month, May, where they took 27. Now, if they took 27 cases, let's say they can take 20, let's say they can take 30 cases, and the average is 2 per 1,000, then they could get 15,000 case numbers. They could go from 30,000 to 45,000, right? And while they're at it, let's say they had some cases at 47, 48, 49,000, they might say, you know what, maybe right now, we've set our capacity as 30 max, but we could handle for 40 cases, and 40 cases would get us all the way to 50,000, right? They could say that because they're a small enough embassy. The average number of cases per 1,000 is very low. And it's pretty easy to do a small handful of extra cases. It won't benefit many people, obviously, but it will benefit the people that are at Moldova, right? And so we could see the occasional little embassy like this who says, yeah, we're actually going to expand our capacity. And maybe that's the conversation that's going on between KCC and the embassies right now, where KCC is saying, hey, to finish the year and get all the way to 50,000, we would need you to take 40 cases, Mr. Moldova. And Moldova said, yeah, fair enough. We'll do it a little bit more, right? Maybe that's happening, right? We don't really know for sure, but that could be happening. And because there's that back and forth negotiation, and there are 150 odd embassies that they've got to negotiate with, that's taking a bit more time. So that's going back to what I was explaining earlier about why 2NLs are late. And in terms of the understanding of where they'll get to, you can see that at a smaller embassy that only has a small number of cases per thousand, you've got much better chances. Somebody asked me about Croatia this morning. Let me show you that one. Croatia took one case prior to 1/1 and 2 cases in the month of January. That's too few cases for me to say anything about that. There's no normal number of cases per thousand. That's completely too small. Now, is it too small because they've limited that? I don't know. I haven't checked the numbers, but it's completely impossible, or at least difficult, to say what they will do. Like whether if they had to take 5 cases, would they take them? They probably would, because it's a tiny little embassy that is not doing very much. And if they take 5 cases, the interviews only take like 10 minutes each at most, right? So could they spare an hour to let people get interviewed there? Yeah, sure, they could do that. Will they? I don't know. That's what we have to wait and see. Okay. All right. So I've pointed out a couple of examples there. I've taken a couple of big embassies, a couple of small embassies, one very, very small embassy, one relatively small embassy. So I've explained how you can do that, and you can go and do that for your same embassy. There are some embassies that the story is going to be very different because their capacity has been restricted all the way through the year, and they've built big backlogs, right? Accra, Ankara, Addis Ababa, those are going to be a different story entirely. They won't get anywhere close to the visa bulletin numbers that we've got released for September. That's just the way it's going to be with those embassies, right? They're not suddenly going to turn around and have an amazing performance, right? Okay, so that's pretty much covered my thoughts on what's about to happen. Who knows? By the time I publish this embassy, we may see people start to say, "Hey, I just got my 2NL," and so maybe people will have relaxed. But honestly, some of you need to go and take a Valium or take a chill pill of some sort, and just chill out, because nothing's going wrong here. They haven't stopped the program. It's all fine. Okay, so chill out. Okay, everybody, I hope that was useful to you. I hope that was informative and has calmed some of you down. And undoubtedly, there will be some people that disagree with me, but that's because you're dopey. All right, everybody, thanks then. Bye-bye.